My parents bought my sister a house, then shoved the mortgage papers onto me. "You've saved enough. It's your turn to help the family." I said no. They dragged me to court for $500,000, but the judge asked one thing. "What if I told you that the people who raised you, the ones who taught you right from wrong, would one day drag you to court, demanding $500,000? Because that's exactly what my own parents did to me, and it shattered everything I thought I knew about family. My name is Cassandra, I'm 32, and until about 6 months ago, I genuinely believed I was doing everything right. I had a good job as a software engineer, responsible savings, and I lived well within my means. I'd always been the responsible one, compared to my younger sister, Allison. But absolutely nothing could have prepared me for that family dinner when my parents slid mortgage papers across the table with a smile, saying, "You've saved enough. It's time you help family." Those words, they still echo in my nightmares. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, my parents, Julia and Donald Wilson, had extremely clear expectations for me. From an incredibly early age, I was drilled on the value of a dollar. Budgeting spreadsheets. I had them at 10 years old. If I wanted new clothes or to go to the movies with friends, I had to save for it. Summer jobs started at 15, shelving books at the library, then scooping ice cream. My parents were proud, yes, but also relentless. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Cassie," my father would say, reviewing my savings account statements at the kitchen table at least once a week. They pushed me to apply for every scholarship, and thanks to that constant push and my own determination, I secured enough scholarships to cover about 70% of my tuition at the University of Washington. For the rest, I worked 2 part-time jobs through college, mornings at a campus coffee shop, evenings at the computer lab. I lived in the cheapest dorm, survived on ramen and meal plan food, and graduated with minimal student loans, which I paid off in just 3 years of working. My sister Allison's experience was a different universe entirely, and she had the same parents. Allison, 3 years younger than me, wanted new clothes. My mom took her shopping. School trip money. Dad wrote a check, no questions asked. Allison's allowance came with no strings attached, no budgeting lessons, just cash. "Your sister is more sensitive than you," my mother would explain whenever I dared point out the blatant disparity. "Not everyone can be as naturally responsible as you are, Cassie." After college, I moved to Seattle permanently, landing a job at a growing tech company. I started as a junior developer and, over 10 years, worked my way up to a senior software engineer with a really good salary. But even with that income growth, I maintained a modest lifestyle. A small 1-bedroom apartment in a decent, but not fancy, neighborhood. A reliable used Toyota bought with cash. I packed my lunch most days, treating myself to dinner out only occasionally. Meanwhile, Allison's financial irresponsibility just kept going. She changed her college major 4 times, stretching her education to 6 years, all fully funded by our parents. After graduation, she bounced between jobs, never sticking with anything for more than 8 months. It was always, the work was unfulfilling, or she disagreed with her manager, or she needed to find herself, through 3 months of travel between gigs. Our parents, they supported her always, paid her rent when she was short, covered her car payment when work was too stressful. They even paid off a $15,000 credit card debt. She racked up buying designer clothes and taking weekend trips to Vegas. Allison is still figuring things out, my father would say dismissively when I expressed concern. Not everyone knows their path as clearly as you do. I love my sister, I really did, but the double standard was beyond frustrating. At family gatherings, it was painfully clear she had no concept of financial responsibility. She'd show up in brand new, expensive outfits, tags still on, talking about the latest brunch spots or concert tickets, all while working part-time at a boutique that barely covered her gas. Despite all that inequality, I focused on building my life. I worked hard, earned promotions, and slowly, meticulously built my savings. After years of careful planning, I finally reached my goal, enough money for a down payment on a modest condo in Seattle. It wasn't anything fancy, but it would be mine, and the mortgage would actually be less than my current rent. I was so excited, so incredibly proud of this achievement I'd worked toward for so long. So, when I received an invitation to my parents' house for Sunday dinner that April, I thought, maybe, just maybe, They wanted to celebrate my home buying plans. I'd mentioned it briefly on our last call, and though they hadn't seemed particularly excited, I hoped they'd surprise me with their support. Oh, how wrong I was. I arrived at their suburban Portland home exactly at 6. The familiar, comforting smell of my mother's lasagna filled the air, my favorite childhood meal. The table was set with the good china, reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and a bottle of wine was already open. "Cassie, right on time as always," my mother, Julia, said, hugging me tightly. She looked nice, wearing a new blouse, her hair freshly colored. My father, Donald, came in from the living room, checked his watch, then gave me a quick hug. "Traffic wasn't bad?" he asked, pouring me a glass of wine without waiting for an answer. "No, the drive from Seattle was smooth," I replied, catching a quick, almost imperceptible glance they exchanged. Something felt off, but I couldn't place it. "Where's Allison?" I asked, noticing the table was set for just 3. "Oh, she couldn't make it tonight," my mother said a little too quickly. "She's in San Diego with some friends. A last-minute trip. You know how spontaneous your sister is." We sat down, and my parents kept the conversation light at first. My job, Seattle weather, a book I mentioned. But they were distracted. My father checked his watch repeatedly. My mother refilled my wine glass before it was even half empty. After the main course, instead of bringing out dessert, my mother cleared the plates, then returned to her seat. My father cleared his throat, straightened, and folded his hands on the table. "Cassie," he began, his voice oddly formal, "we have some exciting news." My heart sank. "We've helped Allison buy a house." "Oh," I said, genuinely surprised. "That's big news. I didn't realize Allison was looking to buy, or that she'd saved enough for a down payment." My mother laughed, a little too brightly. "Well, you know your sister. When she falls in love with something, she goes for it. She found this absolutely perfect place in the West Hills neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a gorgeous view, walking distance to all those cute shops." I nearly choked on my wine. West Hills was one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Portland. "That sounds expensive," I managed to say. "It is an investment in her future," my father stated firmly. "The housing market is only going up, and it's a good neighborhood. The schools are excellent." "Schools?" I thought, my mind reeling. "Schools?" I asked aloud. "Is Allison planning to have children soon? Is she even dating anyone seriously?" The last I heard, my sister was still very much enjoying the single life. My parents exchanged another look. My mother reached for a folder sitting on the sideboard and slid it across the table toward me. "The thing is, Cassie," my father continued, his voice softer, almost cajoling, "we took out the mortgage in our names. Since Allison's credit isn't, well, you know how it is. But we've realized that with retirement coming up in a few years, we can't really afford the payments." I stared at them, not touching the folder. "So you're selling the house? Or Allison is going to make the payments?" My mother pushed the folder closer. "We need you to take over the payments, sweetheart." The room seemed to tilt. I opened the folder. Mortgage papers for an $800,000 home with a $750,000 mortgage. The monthly payment was over $4,000. "This is a joke, right?" I looked up at their serious faces. "You can't be serious. You want me to pay for Allison's house? A house that costs nearly $1 million. "You have a good job, Cassie," my father said, his tone hardening. "You've always been good with money. You have more than enough saved up." "More than enough?" My voice was tight with disbelief. "I've been saving for years to buy my own place. A modest condo that I can afford, not a mansion in West Hills." "Family helps family," my mother said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled it back. "Allison needs stability to get her life together. You know how she struggles. Where is Allison really?" I demanded, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Does she even know you're asking me this?" "She's really in San Diego," my father insisted. "And yes, she knows we're talking to you about helping with the house." "So, she's on vacation while you ask me to pay for her luxury home?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why isn't she here for this conversation?" "She was nervous about how you'd react," my mother admitted, her eyes darting away. "She knows you've always been judgmental about her choices." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this complete, utter betrayal. My parents had bought my irresponsible sister a house they couldn't afford, and now expected me to foot the bill because I had been responsible with my money. No, I said finally, my voice firm despite the trembling I felt deep inside. Absolutely not. I will not pay for Allison's house. Cassandra Marie Wilson, my father said, using my full name, just like he did when I was in serious trouble as a child. You have more money than you need. Your sister deserves a nice place to live just like you do. I've worked for every dollar I have. I shot back, my voice rising. I've saved and sacrificed for years. Allison has never held a job for more than 8 months. She's never saved a dime in her life. That's not fair, my mother protested, her voice cracking. Your sister has different strengths. Not everyone is good with money like you are. Being good with money isn't some innate talent, Mom. I exploded. It's about making responsible choices day after day, year after year, something you've never expected Allison to do. The conversation devolved into an ugly mess. My father's voice grew louder, lecturing me about family obligation. My mother started crying, claiming I'd always been jealous of the special bond she shared with Allison. They brought up every favor they'd ever done for me, conveniently forgetting the years of self-sufficiency I'd maintained while they bankrolled my sister's every whim. If you don't help your sister, my father finally threatened, his face red with anger, you're not the daughter we raised you to be. I stood up from the table, shaking with anger and disbelief. Maybe I'm not, I said, my voice cold. Maybe I'm better than that. I left without dessert, the mortgage papers still sitting untouched on the table, a toxic monument to their demand. For 3 days after that disastrous dinner, I ignored all calls and texts from my parents. There were so many, each more guilt-laden than the last. Your sister is heartbroken. We raised you to care about family after all we've done for you. I threw myself into work, trying desperately to process what had just happened. Had my parents always seen me as nothing more than a financial resource for my sister? Had they been planning this all along, encouraging my responsible habits so they could eventually tap into my savings? The thought was a chilling dagger to the heart. On the 4th day, there was a knock at my apartment door. I looked through the peephole to see Allison standing there, her eyes puffy, as if she'd been crying. Against my better judgment, I let her in. "Cassie, please," she started the moment the door closed behind her. "You have to help me. I love this house so much, and I had no idea Mom and Dad were going to ask you to pay for all of it. I thought they were just going to ask you to help a little bit." She looked around my small apartment with barely disguised disdain. "It's not like you're using your money for much anyway. You live like you're still in college. I live within my means," I corrected her, my voice tight. "And I've been saving to buy my own place. But you could still help me and do that." Allison insisted, utterly oblivious. "You make so much money at your fancy tech job." Something in her phrasing clicked. "Wait a minute," I said, a slow, dawning horror washing over me. "You said you had no idea they were going to ask me to pay for all of it, so you didn't know they were going to ask me for money." Allison's face flushed. "Well, I mean, we talked about it a little. You were in on this from the beginning," I realized aloud, the pieces falling into place with a sickening thud. "You knew they were going to ask me to pay for your house. Not the whole mortgage," Allison protested, her voice rising. "Just, help out until I get on my feet. Find a better job. You've been getting on your feet for 10 years, Allison." I finally snapped, all patience gone. "When are you actually going to stand on them?" Our argument escalated rapidly, a decade of resentment boiling over. Allison finally stormed out, slamming my door hard enough that my neighbor poked his head out to check if everything was okay. That evening, I finally answered my parents' call, determined to set the record straight, once and for all. "Cassandra," my father began, his voice dangerously formal, "we need to discuss the situation with your sister's house." "There is no situation," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hand. "I'm not paying for Allison's mortgage. End of discussion. We've already put down a substantial down payment," my mother chimed in, sounding desperate. "We took it from our retirement fund because we believed you would help with the monthly payments." A cold wave of shock washed over me. "So, you made a massive financial decision based on money I never offered or agreed to give. That's not my responsibility to fix." "We're family," my father insisted, his voice growing sharp. "Family takes care of each other." Funny how that principle only applies when Allison needs something, or when you need something for Allison. I pointed out, my anger simmering. It never applied. When I was working 2 jobs in college, or when I was eating ramen for dinner 5 nights a week to pay off my student loans. The conversation devolved into a whirlwind of accusations and guilt-tripping. My parents' tone grew increasingly hostile as they realized I wasn't going to cave. "You'll regret the selfishness," my father finally threatened, before hanging up. A week later, I received a call from my Aunt Eleanor, my mother's sister, who lived in Eugene. "Cassie, honey, what's this I hear about you refusing to help your sister?" she asked without preamble. I explained the entire situation, bracing myself for another lecture about family obligation. "Those fools!" Aunt Eleanor sighed instead, her voice filled with exasperation. "I told Julia this was a terrible idea. Did you know they emptied their retirement accounts for Allison's down payment? Nearly $300,000 gone." At their age, this revelation stunned me. My parents were in their early 60s. They had just decimated their entire retirement savings for Allison's house, and now they expected me to take on an additional financial burden to fix their poor decision. Over the next few weeks, the family divide grew into a canyon. Relatives took sides, with most supporting my parents and Allison. I received passive-aggressive emails from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. My grandmother called to tell me she was disappointed in my selfish attitude. Only Aunt Eleanor and my Uncle Philip stood by me, understanding the truly unreasonable position my parents had put me in. Concerned about the escalating situation, I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor, Gabriela Martinez. She listened to my story with increasing alarm. "You need to protect yourself legally," Gabriela advised. "Given how determined your parents seem, I wouldn't be surprised if they try something else to get your money." I thought she was being paranoid, until 3 days later, when a certified letter arrived at my apartment. My hands shook as I opened it to find legal papers. My parents were suing me for $500,000. Their claim, that I had verbally agreed years ago to help with family expenses in return for their investment in my education and future. They were claiming that my entire financial success was contingent on their support, and therefore, I owed them recompense now that they needed it. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But there it was, in black and white, with a court date set for just 6 weeks away. The panic attack hit me the moment I finished reading those lawsuit papers. My chest tightened. My vision blurred at the edges, and I couldn't catch my breath. I slid down against my apartment wall, the papers clutched in my shaking hand, gasping for air and fighting waves of dizziness. When I could finally breathe again, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and spent the day researching attorneys. By afternoon, I had an emergency appointment with Lawrence Thompson, a family law specialist with experience in financial disputes. Lawrence's office was small but professional, law books lining the walls, framed diplomas behind his desk. He was an older man with salt and pepper hair, reading glasses perched on his nose. He reviewed the lawsuit documents while I sat nervously across from him. "This is," he began, then paused, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. "This is, quite frankly, one of the more absurd lawsuits I've seen in my 30 years of practice. But absurd doesn't mean harmless. Even frivolous lawsuits can be dangerous if not properly defended. So, they can't really win, right?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. "It's highly unlikely," he admitted. "Their claim that you verbally agreed to financial support is difficult to prove without documentation. However," he cautioned, "family court can sometimes be unpredictable, especially when emotional appeals are involved. We need to build a strong defense." Over the next few days, a truly disturbing discovery came to light. My parents had falsified documents, claiming I had promised financial support. They had created backdated emails and letters in which I supposedly acknowledged a debt to them for raising me and putting me through college. "These are completely fake," I told Lawrence, staring in disbelief at the documents he'd received through discovery. "I never wrote any of these." "I suspected as much," Lawrence replied grimly. "The good news is that forgery will completely undermine their case. The bad news is that your parents have just committed fraud, which could have serious consequences for them." The realization that my own parents would go so far as to commit forgery to take my money left me numb. What had happened to the people who raised me, who taught me right from wrong? Were they always capable of this? Or had their devotion to Allison corrupted them so completely? I threw myself into preparing our defense. I gathered bank statements showing I had supported myself financially since college. I found old emails thanking my parents for birthday gifts, but clearly indicating that all financial support had ended after high school. I even located my college financial aid records, showing that my education had been funded primarily through scholarships and my own work, not parental support. The process took a devastating toll on me. I developed insomnia, lying awake at night, replaying my childhood, questioning every memory through this new, horrifying lens of betrayal. My appetite disappeared, and I lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks. At work, I made careless mistakes, drawing concerned looks from my manager. My coworker, Heather, noticed my deterioration and invited me to lunch. Over sandwiches that I mostly picked at, I confided in her about the lawsuit. My parents did something similar, Heather revealed, surprising me. Not a lawsuit, but they emptied my college fund to pay for my brother's gambling debts. I know how it feels to be the responsible one who gets punished for it. Her understanding was a lifeline in a sea of judgment. Most people I told about the situation immediately asked what I might have done to cause such a rift, as if parents suing their child must be the child's fault. A week before the court date, I ran into Allison at a coffee shop near my apartment. I hadn't even known she was in Seattle. She was wearing expensive new boots and carrying a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Are you happy now?" she demanded, her voice loud enough that other customers turned to look. "You're tearing our family apart with your selfishness." "I'm selfish." I kept my voice low despite the searing anger. "You're living in a house our parents can't afford while they sue me for money I earned." "How, exactly, am I the selfish one here? They've given up everything for me, and you won't help at all." Allison shot back, tears welling in her eyes. "Do you know Dad's talking about coming out of retirement to pay the mortgage? Then sell it," I suggested, my voice flat. "Get a place you can actually afford." "I'm not selling my dream home just because you're being stingy," she snapped. "I deserve that house. I deserve nice things, too, Cassie. Deserving has nothing to do with it," I replied, the weariness settling deep in my bones. "It's about what you can afford. I can afford it if you help," she insisted, as if this logic made perfect sense. I left the coffee shop shaking with anger, but the encounter provided one important piece of information. Allison had already moved into the house. Despite the uncertain mortgage situation, she was counting on winning the lawsuit or wearing me down. The day of the first court appearance arrived. I dressed in a conservative navy blue suit and low heels, my hair pulled back in a neat bun. Lawrence had advised me to look professional but not flashy, to counter any narrative my parents might put forward about me being frivolous with money. Walking into the courtroom and seeing my parents sitting at the opposite table was surreal. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes, but my father stared at me coldly. They looked like strangers. Not the people who had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, bandage my scraped knees. Judge Catherine Martinez was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who studied both parties with a critical eye before calling the court to order. Her initial questions immediately revealed her skepticism about the case. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, reviewing the documents before her. "The plaintiffs, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, are suing their daughter for $500,000 based on an alleged verbal agreement made when she was how old?" 18, Your Honor, my parents' attorney, Benjamin Russell, answered smoothly. "When she left for college, and this agreement was never put in writing. It was a family matter, Your Honor, a matter of trust between parents and child." Judge Martinez's eyebrow rose slightly. "I see. And the defendants have submitted evidence that these supposedly supporting emails are forgeries." "We dispute that characterization," Benjamin replied smoothly. "There may be some confusion about dates and content." "Confusion?" the judge repeated dryly. "About who wrote the emails and when." "Interesting choice of words, counselor." The first day in court made it clear this would not be a simple or quick resolution. My parents' attorney painted me as an ungrateful daughter who had benefited from their sacrifices only to abandon them in their time of need. Lawrence methodically presented evidence of my financial independence and, crucially, the falsified documents. By the end of the day, Judge Martinez, seemed increasingly troubled by the case before her. Before adjourning, she looked directly at my parents. "I have one question I'd like the plaintiffs to consider before we continue tomorrow," she said. "Did you ever consider your daughter might have her own financial goals?" My father answered without hesitation, his voice ringing with certainty. "She has more than she needs. Allison needs it more." The judge made a note, her expression unreadable. "We'll resume at 9 tomorrow morning." The courtroom felt colder on the second day, though the temperature hadn't changed. I sat rigidly beside Lawrence, avoiding looking at my parents across the aisle. Their attorney, Benjamin Russell, was arranging papers with a confidence that worried me, despite Lawrence's assurances that our case was strong. Judge Martinez entered, and we all arose. Her face gave nothing away as she took her seat and called the court to order. "We'll continue with testimony today. Plaintiff's counsel, call your first witness." Benjamin called my father to the stand first. Donald Wilson took the oath and sat in the witness chair, looking distinguished in his best suit, his silver hair neatly combed. He spoke clearly and confidently about how he and my mother had invested everything in my future. "We made sacrifices so Cassandra could succeed," he testified, his voice full of self-pity. "We drove an old car so she could have the best educational opportunities. We took her to museums and science camps. We paid for advanced math tutoring when she showed aptitude." Benjamin guided him through a narrative that made it sound like my entire childhood had been an expensive training program for my future earning potential. "And was there an understanding about how this investment would be repaid?" Benjamin asked, his voice gentle. "Absolutely," my father answered without hesitation. Cassandra agreed that once she was established in her career, she would help support the family financially. She specifically promised to help her sister if needed. It was a complete fabrication, but delivered with such conviction that I saw a juror nodding along. When Lawrence cross-examined my father, he started gently. "Mr. Wilson, did you pay for your daughter's college tuition?" "We contributed." My father hedged. Lawrence presented my scholarship letters and financial aid documents. These records show that 90% of Cassandra's education was funded through scholarships and her own work-study jobs. Your contribution amounted to approximately $5,000 over 4 years. Is that correct? My father shifted uncomfortably. The dollar amount doesn't reflect the emotional support we provided. "I'm asking about financial contributions, sir," Lawrence pressed, his voice firm. $5,000 total. Yes or no? Approximately. Yes, my father admitted reluctantly. Lawrence then presented my bank records, showing how I had supported myself since graduation, evidence of my student loans that I paid myself, and documentation of the modest lifestyle I maintained despite my growing income. "Would you characterize your daughter as financially irresponsible, Mr. Wilson?" Lawrence asked, his tone even. "No," my father conceded, his face tightening. "Cassie has always been good with money. Yet you believe she owes you $500,000 because family takes care of family," my father insisted, his voice rising in frustration. "She has the means to help her sister, and she refuses out of spite." My mother testified next, her testimony more emotional than factual. She cried several times, talking about how worried she was about Allison's future and how hurt she was by my abandonment of the family. She spoke about my sister's sensitive nature and creative spirit that made practical matters like steady employment difficult for her. "Allison needs stability to flourish," she insisted, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "This house is her chance to finally find her footing." Under cross-examination, Lawrence was respectful but persistent. "Mrs. Wilson, how many times has Allison held a job for more than 1 year?" My mother hesitated, wringing her hands. "She's had challenges with employment. So the answer is never, correct? Not once in the 12 years since she graduated high school." "Different people have different paths," my mother replied defensively. "Indeed they do," Lawrence agreed. "And would you say you've supported Allison financially throughout her adult life?" "We've helped her when needed. According to these bank records," Lawrence said, presenting exhibits, "you and your husband have provided Allison with approximately $375,000 in direct financial support since she turned 18. Is that accurate?" The courtroom murmured at the staggering figure. My mother looked down at her hands, her face pale. "That sounds about right." "And during that same period, How much financial support did you provide to Cassandra? Cassie didn't need our help, my mother replied, as if this were a failing on my part. So the answer is $0. Correct. Yes, she admitted quietly. When it was my turn to testify, I was nervous, but utterly determined to speak my truth. I explained how I had worked my way through college, built my career through consistent effort, and saved carefully for years toward my goal of home ownership. Did you ever promise your parents repayment for raising you? Lawrence asked, his gaze steady. No, I said firmly, meeting his eyes. I've always been grateful for the opportunities they provided, but there was never any agreement that I would financially support them or my sister in adulthood. What about these emails they presented as evidence? Lawrence handed me the printouts of the forgeries. I examined them carefully. These are fake, I said, my voice filled with a quiet fury. I never wrote these. You can even see the inconsistencies in how my name is spelled in the signature block, and the email address shown here wasn't even my email address during the dates claimed. Benjamin's cross-examination was aggressive, designed to provoke an emotional response. Isn't it true that you've always resented your sister? He demanded, pointing a finger at me. No, I replied calmly, despite the fire in my veins. I love Allison, but I don't believe enabling her financial irresponsibility is good for her or for our family. So, you admit you're judging your sister's lifestyle choices? I'm making observations based on a pattern of behavior over many years, I corrected him. Benjamin switched tactics. Your parents gave you life, raised you, clothed you, fed you. Do you believe you owe them nothing in return? I believe I owe them respect, love, and gratitude, I replied, holding his gaze. I don't believe I owe them $500,000 to buy my sister a luxury home she can't afford. The most revealing moment came when Benjamin called a surprise witness, Allison herself. She entered the courtroom wearing a conservative dress, her usual flashy style subdued for the occasion. She tearfully testified about how much the house meant to her and how my refusal to help was destroying our family. I just want a chance to start over, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. A stable home would give me that chance. During cross-examination, Lawrence was gentle but direct. Miss Wilson, are you currently employed? I'm between jobs at the moment, Allison admitted, looking down. How many job applications have you submitted in the past month? I'm taking some time to figure out my next career move, she hedged. So, none, Lawrence clarified, his voice neutral. Not yet, she conceded reluctantly. And this house in West Hills, how much is the mortgage payment? I'm not sure exactly, Allison said, looking uncomfortable. My parents handle that. It's $4,300 per month, Lawrence informed her, looking at a document. Without steady employment, how did you plan to make these payments? Cassie was supposed to help until I got established, Allison replied, as if this had been an agreed-upon fact. Did you and your sister ever discuss this arrangement directly? No, but my parents said they would take care of it. One final question, Lawrence said, his voice soft but carrying immense weight. If you had to choose between keeping this specific house and healing the rift with your sister, which would you choose? Allison hesitated, looking truly trapped, her eyes darting between her parents and me. That's not a fair question. I shouldn't have to choose. Nevertheless, it's the question before you, Lawrence pressed gently. I deserve that house, Allison finally said, her voice hardening, all pretense of vulnerability gone. Cassie can afford to help me keep it if she wasn't so selfish. I felt a strange, chilling sense of clarity at her words. The sister I loved was in there somewhere, but years of enablement had buried her beneath layers of entitlement and self-centeredness so deep I barely recognized her. After a full day of testimony, Judge Martinez called for final arguments. Benjamin went first, making an impassioned plea about family obligation and moral responsibility that, disturbingly, sounded convincing even to my ears. Lawrence's closing argument was more measured, but no less powerful. Your Honor, he began, this case isn't about family loyalty or love. It's about whether an adult child is legally obligated to fund their sibling's lifestyle. The evidence clearly shows there was never any agreement, verbal or otherwise, that Miss Wilson would provide financial support to her parents or sister. The plaintiffs have resorted to fabricating evidence because no legitimate evidence exists. This lawsuit is an attempt to use the legal system to enforce a family expectation that has no basis in law or equity. Judge Martinez listened attentively, taking notes throughout. When both attorneys had finished, she looked at her calendar. "I'll take this matter under advisement," she announced. "We'll reconvene next Friday at 9 a.m. for my ruling." Court is adjourned. As we filed out, my mother tried to approach me, but Lawrence gently steered me toward the exit. "No conversations with the plaintiffs outside of court," he murmured. Through the glass doors, I saw my father arguing with their attorney in the hallway, his face flushed with anger. Whatever was happening, it didn't look like the confidence of someone expecting to win. "How do you think it went?" I asked Lawrence once we were safely in his car. "As well as could be expected," he replied carefully. "Judge Martinez is thorough and fair. The forgeries hurt their case significantly, and your sister's testimony probably didn't help them either. But we have a week to wait, so try to focus on your normal routine if you can." Normal routine. As if anything could ever be normal again. The week waiting for the verdict was the longest of my life. I returned to work, but I might as well have been a ghost haunting my desk. My mind constantly replayed moments from the trial, analyzing every word, every reaction from the judge. When my manager, Francis, asked if everything was okay, I finally broke down and told him about the lawsuit. "Take whatever time you need," he said, surprising me with his understanding. "Family issues are the hardest." My performance was suffering, and I knew it. I made coding errors I would normally catch immediately. In one team meeting, I completely zoned out and had to ask my colleague to repeat a question 3 times. Sleep became a distant memory. I would lie awake until 3 or 4 in the morning, then drag myself through the day on caffeine and anxiety. My apartment, usually neat and organized, devolved into chaos as I lost the energy for even basic cleaning. On Wednesday, 3 days before the verdict, I finally accepted that I needed help. I called a therapist whose name Heather had given me, Dr. Victoria Chin, and managed to get an emergency appointment that afternoon. Dr. Victoria's office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. She listened without judgment as I poured out the whole sordid story. "What you're experiencing is a form of betrayal trauma," she explained gently. "When the people who are supposed to love and protect you become a source of harm, it shakes your entire foundation. Your reaction is completely normal. Will I ever be able to trust them again?" I asked, my voice raw. "Or anyone. That's something we'll work through together," she promised. "But right now, let's focus on getting you through this immediate crisis." That evening, I received an unexpected text from Allison. "I didn't know they were going to sue you." I swear, it was the first hint of remorse she'd shown since this nightmare began. I wasn't ready to respond, but I saved the message. Maybe there was still a glimmer of my real sister underneath all that entitlement. Friday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress and low heels, applied minimal makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes, and met Lawrence at the courthouse 30 minutes early. "Whatever happens today," he told me, "remember that you stood up for yourself with dignity and truth. That counts for something." The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. My parents sat at their table with Benjamin, my father looking confident, my mother nervously twisting a tissue in her hands. I noticed Allison wasn't present, though several other relatives were sitting behind my parents, including my grandmother and 2 aunts from my father's side. On my side of the courtroom, the bench was empty until the last minute when Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Philip slipped in, followed by Heather from work. Their presence brought an unexpected lump to my throat. Judge Martinez entered, her face impassive as always. We rose, then sat at her direction. She arranged her papers, put on her reading glasses, and began. "In the case of Wilson versus Wilson, I have reviewed all testimony and evidence presented. This is, without doubt, one of the more troubling family disputes to come before my court." She looked directly at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, your claim rests on an alleged verbal agreement that your daughter would provide financial support to you and her sister in return for your investment in her upbringing and education. You have provided no credible evidence that such an agreement ever existed. The emails you submitted as evidence have been proven to be fabrications, a serious matter that could result in charges of perjury and fraud." My father's face paled. My mother began to cry silently. "Beyond the legal issues," Judge Martinez continued, her voice firm, "I find the underlying premise of your lawsuit disturbing. Parenthood is not a financial investment with expected monetary returns. Children do not owe their parents repayment for doing what parents are morally and legally obligated to do, provide for their children's basic needs." She turned to me. "Miss Wilson, the evidence shows you have been financially independent since college, working diligently to build your career and savings. You have no legal obligation to fund a house purchase for your sister, regardless of family expectations." Looking back at my parents, she delivered her verdict. "This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the plaintiffs will pay the defendant's legal fees in full." She paused, removing her glasses. "As a judge, my role ends with the legal verdict. But as a person who has sat in this courtroom for 20 years watching families tear themselves apart, I would be remiss not to add this. Whatever happens when you leave this courtroom today, remember that some damage cannot be undone with apologies alone. Trust once broken must be rebuilt, brick by brick. I sincerely hope you find a way forward that honors the true meaning of family, which has nothing to do with financial transactions and everything to do with mutual respect and love." With that, she struck her gavel and left the bench. My parents' reaction was immediate and shocking. My father stood and shouted at their attorney, his face contorted with rage. "You said this was a sure thing. You said she'd have to settle." Court officers moved toward him as Benjamin tried to calm him down. My mother collapsed in tears while relatives gathered around them, throwing accusing glances my way. Lawrence ushered me out a side door to avoid the scene. In the hallway, and Eleanor hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself," she whispered. "Your parents will regret this madness when they calm down." But they didn't calm down. The fallout was swift and far-reaching. My parents faced not only my legal fees but also the prospect of a house they couldn't afford. Family gatherings were now divided into camps, with holiday plans in ruins. Some relatives stopped speaking to me entirely, while others cut ties with my parents over their shocking behavior. 2 weeks after the verdict, I returned to my apartment after work to find my door ajar. Inside, drawers had been emptied onto the floor, furniture overturned, and selfish bitch spray-painted on my living room wall. Nothing valuable was taken, making it clear this was about sending a message, not theft. The police officer who responded suggested it was likely someone who knew me. "Any family disputes recently?" he asked, not knowing how loaded that question was. I didn't say it was Allison, but in my heart I knew. The handwriting on the wall matched her loopy style. And who else would be this angry? After filing a police report, I stayed with Heather for a few nights while my landlord repaired the damage. I considered a restraining order, but couldn't bring myself to take that final step against my own family, despite Lawrence's strong recommendation. A month after the verdict, Aunt Eleanor called with news. "Your parents are selling their house," she told me gently. The mortgage on Allison's place, plus the legal fees, pushed them to the brink of bankruptcy. They're downsizing to a condo. "What about Allison's dream house?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "On the market as of yesterday," Aunt Eleanor replied. "They're using the proceeds to pay off their debts. Allison is furious, of course. She's staying with your cousin Patricia for now." I felt no satisfaction at the news, only a hollow sadness for what my family had become. The house that had torn us apart would soon belong to strangers, while the real damage remained. 6 months passed. Seattle's summer faded into a rainy autumn, and I settled into a new rhythm of life. Weekly sessions with Dr. Victoria helped me process the trauma of the lawsuit and its aftermath. At first, I talked about little else, reliving the betrayal and anger in an endless loop. Gradually, we expanded to explore patterns in my family dynamics that went back generations. "Your role as the responsible one didn't start when you were an adult," Dr. Victoria pointed out during one session. "From what you've described, you were parentified from a young age, taking on adult levels of responsibility, while Allison was perpetually infantilized." "But why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. "Why treat us so differently?" "Sometimes parents project their own unresolved issues onto their children," she explained. "Your mother might have seen herself in Allison, while you reminded her of responsibilities she resented. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but understanding it might help you heal." Slowly, painstakingly, I began rebuilding my life. I moved forward with my original plan to buy my own home, closing on a modest 2-bedroom condo near a park. It wasn't the luxury house in West Hills that had caused so much strife, but it was mine, bought with money I had earned and saved, a true symbol of my independence and resilience. On a crisp October morning, I was sorting through emails when one subject line made me freeze. "Can we talk, Allison?" I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won out. The message was surprisingly humble. "Cassie, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I wouldn't blame you if you deleted this immediately, but if you're still reading, I'd like to meet somewhere public to talk. No demands, no drama. I promise. Just talk. Let me know if you're willing, Allison." Against my better judgment, and after discussing it thoroughly with Dr. Victoria, I agreed to meet my sister at a coffee shop equidistant between our locations. I arrived early, chose a table with a clear view of the entrance and exit, and ordered a latte I was too nervous to drink. Allison arrived precisely on time, a punctuality so uncharacteristic that it spoke volumes about her state of mind. She looked different somehow. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She wore jeans, a simple sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger, more like the sister I remembered from before adult responsibilities had divided us. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I honestly wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted, my guard still up. We sat in awkward silence until our drinks arrived. Then Allison took a deep breath and met my eyes directly. "I'm sorry, Cassie. I'm so sorry for everything. For the lawsuit, for the house, for the way I treated you, for the apartment." She faltered, her eyes welling up. "Yes, that was me. I was drunk and so angry. It was inexcusable." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice cautious. "Because I'm finally getting help," she replied. "I've been seeing a financial counselor for 3 months now, and a therapist. After everything fell apart with the house, I had to move in with Patricia, and she gave me an ultimatum: get professional help or find somewhere else to live." "So, you're apologizing because Patricia forced you to?" "No." Allison shook her head vehemently. "I'm apologizing because I see things clearly for the first time in years. My counselor, Hannah, had me track every dollar I've spent for the past 5 years. Do you know how much Mom and Dad gave me during that time? Over $200,000. And I have nothing to show for it. Nothing." She stirred her coffee absently, a distant look in her eyes. "I've never had to face consequences before. Mom and Dad always fixed everything for me. When they couldn't fix the house situation, when they lost their own home because of me, something finally clicked. This isn't who I want to be." I listened cautiously, wanting desperately to believe her, but wary of being hurt again. "I have a job now," she continued. "Nothing glamorous, just administrative work at a dental office. But I've kept it for 4 months, and I'm good at it. I have my own tiny apartment. I'm on a strict budget for the first time in my life." "What about Mom and Dad?" I asked, the question I'd been avoiding. Allison's face fell. "They're still angry at you, at me, at the world. They lost almost everything because of the choices they made for me. Dad had to go back to work part-time. They're living in a small rental condo now. Have they gotten any help? Counseling or anything?" "No," Allison sighed. "They still believe they did nothing wrong. They think the judge was biased against them. Dad talks about appealing the verdict sometimes, though they can't afford another legal battle." We talked for nearly 2 hours, carefully navigating the minefield of our shared past. Allison didn't ask for money or forgiveness, just the chance to begin rebuilding some kind of relationship. As we prepared to leave, she handed me a sealed envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "The first installment," she explained, a shy smile on her face. "I'm paying you back for the damage to your apartment. It's not much, just $200, but I'll send more each month until it's paid off. Hannah helped me work it into my budget." The gesture moved me more than any apology could have. It was the first time Allison had ever taken concrete responsibility for her actions. "I'm not ready to forgive everything," I told her honestly, the words heavy but true. "But I'm willing to try building something new." Slowly, we agreed to text occasionally, and perhaps meet for coffee again in a few weeks. It was a tiny step, but an incredibly important one. While my relationship with Allison showed tentative signs of healing, I had no contact with my parents. Through family grapevines, I heard they had downsized dramatically, selling many possessions to pay debts. My father, who had proudly retired at 60, was now working part-time as a consultant to make ends meet. My mother had taken a job at a local bookstore, her first paid employment in over 30 years. Their situation saddened me, but I recognized it as the natural consequence of their choices, not my responsibility to fix. Dr. Victoria helped me work through the guilt I still occasionally felt, reminding me that establishing boundaries wasn't the same as abandoning family. Healthy boundaries aren't walls, she would say. They're fences with gates that you control. In January, I joined a support group for people dealing with family financial trauma. Our moderator, Marcus, had experienced similar issues with his brothers who had tried to claim his inheritance from their grandmother. The group became a safe space to share experiences without judgment, to learn from others who truly understood the unique pain of financial betrayal by family. Through the group and through deepening friendships with people like Heather, I began building what I thought of as my chosen family. People who respected boundaries, who gave without expectation of return, who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. By spring, I was finally sleeping through the night again. My work performance improved, earning me a promotion I had once thought the lawsuit stress might cost me. I planted flowers on my condo balcony and joined a hiking group that explored trails around Seattle on weekends. The lawsuit had changed me, but not in the ways my parents had intended. Instead of draining my resources to enable my sister, it had strengthened my resolve to live authentically and set healthy boundaries. I began volunteering once a month at a community center, teaching basic financial literacy to young adults, turning my painful experience into something that might help others avoid similar situations. One year, after the verdict, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, reflecting on the journey. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I still felt a pang when friends talked about their holiday plans with family or shared stories of supportive parents. But I had survived, grown, and even flourished in the aftermath of betrayal. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about money at all. It was about defining family on my own terms, about recognizing that love without respect isn't really love at all, and about the power of standing firm in your truth, even when those who should support you the most are trying to tear you down. Family wounds heal slowly, if they heal at all. But I found peace in accepting that some relationships may never be restored to what they once were or what I imagined them to be. The space that acceptance creates allows room for new connections, new definitions of family, new ways of giving and receiving love that don't come with price tags attached. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure over money or expectations? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if my journey resonated with you at all, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about navigating difficult family dynamics. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for your well-being. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey, whatever it may be.